So good evening and thank you everyone for joining. Special thanks to Ganesh to spare some time. We know, I mean, looking at the kind of work and body of work that he has and his association across different bodies, most notably in the recent past with the SBI. I think that's great, and
WhatsApp
for
doesn't work
someone
here.
coming from Pune,
WhatsApp
so
call
it's
doesn't work
always
here.
something which is extra special for us. For others, I would just request you to go on mute, please, while we speak. So here today, this session in particular, if you see that when we look at our GDP numbers currently, it's not very encouraging this year, and for the reasons which is known to all of us, we are around 10.3, 10.4 negative. However, a lot of green shoots is what we can see around today, which gives us sufficient confidence. And one of the most stronger hold that we see is around the manufacturing, which has started to take place right from the MSME to SMEs to even the bigger manufacturing, which are setting up or which are planning to set up shops in India. And maybe a bit of negative China sentiment will always help us. Um, with the IT, if you see during even the current times, at least the bigger firms were pretty strong with work around the digital services. So there's one pivot for sure, which if we see across the spectrum is still digital, because that's one area which most of the organization which may not come with a competence of understanding digital and then maybe tuning their business to take or leverage the most out of it. From that sense, I think Ganesh will be the best placed gentleman to speak about this in terms of India and how we are today on the digital map, as well as what is future in store for us, and what is the right way to do things as we proceed. So on this, obviously for Ganesh, I really don't want to speak much, because if I start talking about his profile, it's all there on the web. We'll just have this session speaking about that if that is the case. Um, Few hygiene factors for the session. As requested, please, all of you, if you can stay on mute. Since it will be a limited audience within this group, we will have ample time for Q&A, whether you put it on the chat. We will periodically take it up as Ganesh feels comfortable, whether it is mid-session, we take a pause and then we take few questions and we do the same. Or you can speak in person, depending on how the group stays today. And Ganesh, I think once you start, you have good 50-55 minutes, the way you want to take. And then if we have some time, we'll take 5-10 minutes of Q&A, if that's all right.
No, I would actually prefer that. Maybe I take about 20-25 minutes and then we can just open it up. I mean, I'm very happy and more comfortable answering questions than boring the hell out of everybody making a long presentation. Don't worry about it.
No, I'm sure a few things coming out of you will be something which will be eye opener for all of us, or a new
No.
learning for all of us.
I think it's a peer group, so very happy to interact. Please feel free to challenge anything I say. Happy to interact.
Sure. So with that, Ganesh, all yours.
Okay, sure. So thank you very much. And first of all, I mean, it's an interesting forum, but I haven't spoken at the Management Consultants Forum before. And what I thought I'll do is make it very broad ranging in the sense that, and I'll give you a kind of quick peek at what I'll cover. Let me talk a little bit about COVID and what we call the COVID push and the technology pull that is driving digital. As many people have said, I mean, what digital was, the pace at which digital was going has been probably accelerated times in 2020, thanks to social distancing and everything else. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We are just finishing almost 2 years of research and writing around what is a concept called digital reengineering. So I'll basically talk about that, saying that, look, what makes digital successful? And I'm very conscious that many of you may already be doing this or may want to do this. So I'll make it very consulting focused. And at the end of it, I'll actually say that, look, if you really want to do consulting in digital, what does it take to be successful? Fortunately, if you look at my own life, we built a company called Zensar primarily on the back of digital. In fact, in the last 5 years of my tenure, 2010 to 2015, I left Zensar in 2016. because of digital and the focus on e-commerce and digital and various segments. This is public knowledge, but the market value of the company went up almost 44% per year. In fact, the stock price was 220 in 2010. And when I left, it was 1,050. So we actually had a 5 times growth in stock price and everything else. So I think it was primarily because we were one of the early consulting firms who could talk strategy consulting around digital. And we actually did a lot of work jointly with the Boston Consulting Group with clients, and also could execute to the last mile. So I think there is still a substantial opportunity in the new ways of digital as I see it. So I'll talk about that. And then maybe if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about Digital India, the kind of work I'm currently doing with the government of India, particularly the Ministry of IT, in areas of digital like the Autonomous Connected Electric Vehicles COE, which is, by the way, right here in Pune. And if any of you are interested, happy to involve you in that. And also a lot of work that my wife and I do for skills around digital in healthcare, just starting some work on digital for education. So we do a lot of work with the government in that area. So I think that's broadly where it is. So very quickly, let me load a presentation. I didn't really want to do a presentation, but maybe I thought it'll anchor our discussion if I show you some slides and then we can kind of open it. And if there's anything urgent that comes to your mind when I'm talking, feel free to interrupt me. As you know, I've been a trainer for a long period of time. So I don't have a problem of being interrupted mid paragraph, mid sentence, mid PowerPoint, no problems. And of course, we'll have enough time, I promise you. At the end, I'm assuming we will go on till 7 o'clock. So I'll leave enough 20, 25 minutes for any Q&A, any suggestions, any thoughts that you have. So that's where we are. Let me load my presentation. Just give me a sec. Can you see it, Chandan? Is it visible?
You can see your screen. There's Zoom page, web page, but not the presentation now.
Hi, how come? Oh.
Something loading now. No.
No?
No. So I would suggest if you just maybe stop the share once and then reshare, maybe it'll help.
Well, let me try it once more, and if it doesn't work, you let me.
Sure.
It should work now. Working now?
No, unfortunately, same screen.
Do you see the screen now?
Yes, Ganesh, you're on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it doesn't load up.
Yes.
So you have a slide, you have a screen which should be architecting post-COVID organizations, which is my presentation. And if it gets stuck for anybody, just do let me know. Okay, so just very quickly, this is something we all know, but I thought I'll just lay down where we are today. Because after March 19th, we're entering the 9th full month of COVID. And I think we've seen a lot of problems. Obviously, we've seen huge amounts of initial disruption in the markets. We've had India, unfortunately, being almost the worst affected country, barring a few really small Latin American nations. And we are finding that obviously China is growing 5% while India is declining. Not good news. And even Vietnam, Thailand, lots of Asia is actually doing it. And if you're not, fortunately, I think the stock markets have been booming. I'm just coming out of a session with a bunch of stock market analysts, and nobody's quite sure why the boom has continued. And now, of course, we are hopeful with all the vaccine hype that the boom will continue, whether it's the Dow Jones in the US or the Sensex here, but we'll have to see. We are also seeing, of course, the biggest downfall or the negative fallout of COVID, which is the layoffs. Obviously, in India, you never know the exact figures. But ILO had predicted 190 million lost jobs by the end of this crisis. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that. There's a lot of disguised job losses in the US, for instance, because of the furlough schemes that the government has been very generous with. People have not been fired because their salaries are being paid by the government. So I think there's the advantage of rich countries being able to afford a stimulus package, whereas in India, with our fiscal deficits and other problems, we've not really been able to do that. And we all know, the global economy, they're expecting that in 2020, which is ending a few days from now, we may see a 3% decline. India could be, in the calendar year, could be much higher than that. It was 5.5 to 8% sometime back. Today the expectation is that after the first quarter, 24.9, and the second quarter, 12. And the finance minister is confidently talking about maybe not more than a 9% GDP decline, but we don't know. And even a 9% GDP decline, if you think about it, and on this base, if we grow, let's say even 12% next year, you will exactly be on March 2022, where we were on March 2020. So it's like almost like a 2-year hiatus in the economy. And we're also finding that, I mean, we started with the migrant worker crisis. Now there isn't too much good news with the farm agitation. There's all kinds of stuff going on, because of which we might well find that the tragedies of unemployment and displaced workers could even make COVID deaths not so important in comparison. So it's not a very good sign. However, having said that, I mean, there are opportunities. I mean, the internet traffic has been spiking 50 to 70%, obviously, because with half the population or maybe 75% of the population working from home, except for some manufacturing companies, I think, there are multiple uses of socially distanced methods of new ways of interacting. I mean, we are finding that if you don't mind putting yourself on mute, will be nice. Okay, so I think new ways of interacting. Again, this morning I was doing a session for human resource heads of large corporations, and everybody's talking about issues about isolation. I mean, it's nice to say that productivity has gone up by people working from home. I mean, I work like a dog, 6 o'clock in the morning with US calls to maybe 10 o'clock at night, and it's not a sustainable proposition. And young people get burnt out. They're not talking to friends. I mean, it's changing now, but it's a bit of an issue psychologically. We're also finding, obviously, I mean, fortunately in the US, things are looking better with the Biden win. But I mean, it was a huge protectionism phenomenon, whether it was in Russia or China or the US, to a certain extent, even in India. And we're finding, the World Wide Web, as we called it, is being replaced very much by national internets or nationally walled gardens, if you will. Data localization. In fact, I do a lot of work in State Bank of India on data policies. And we are finding that data privacy, data security, cyber security are becoming very, very big issues. And that's a science by itself, as you know. Also finding that the new way of interaction and socialization, very much screen to screen. I mean, I spend my life surrounded by 4 screens. I mean, my iPad for reference, this one, which is my main device for interaction, and then my mobile phone for other communication, a television set behind me for the occasional news or cricket input. So, I mean, these are all screen to screen is the new way of interacting. And as could be expected, online gaming, Google Classrooms, that's exploding, which is why the edtech revolution is so high. And interestingly, I mean, 1 crore, the expectation is that 1 crore people will work from home. I mean, just 2 days back, my friend Salil Parekh, who's the CEO of Infosys, talked about the blended model being the way the future will be. TCS has already said that many people will work from home forever. So has Facebook in the US or Microsoft, etc. The sad part in India is that's not very good news, because if all of us stay at home, and I mean, I go to office at least 3 times a week, but many people just don't leave home, which really means that you don't need your offices to be open. Many offices will shut down. So transportation, hospitality, security, healthcare, food services, a lot of that, people are going to lose jobs. So I think that's the flip side of everything we're talking about. So having said all that, let's move to, I talked about that earlier, saying that there is a huge COVID-induced push. That is where the social distancing, everything else is coming in. There is also a technology pull that's happening. And technology, and I won't talk about technology too much, but I mean, if you look at the top part of that slide, I mean, whether it is a middle piece, which is cloud computing, which is how digital started, the extensive ubiquitous use of mobile technologies, and then of course IoT, which is the sensors and actuators, the big data and analytics, I'll talk briefly about it, natural user interfaces, which is graphical user interfaces, augmented reality, virtual reality, and connectivity literally everywhere. So what that technology stack has done is created all the trends you see in the middle. So the Internet of Everything, which is there in the middle, saying that, look, everything is connected on the internet, your washing machine, your car, your mobile phone, everything else. And of course, it's causing integration of digital and physical experiences, because if you look at Netflix, for instance, I mean, everything is semi-automated, personalized, etc. Knowledge work, I mean, we all know about robots on the shop floor in manufacturing, but with robotic process automation, a lot of knowledge processes are being automated. And not only are they being automated, there is what they call cognitive robotics process automation, which is intelligent or AI-enabled RPA. Effectively, a cognitive RPA can be more effective, let's say, in a bank process than the bank clerk is, because it's learning all the time through machine learning. And big data and advanced analytics, I'll talk briefly about it. The social matrix, which is, of course, all the social media tools that are there at our disposal, whether it's WhatsApp or a Facebook or a Google or a Amazon or whatever. And essentially everything is a service. No longer are people even investing in data centers. Things are moving to the cloud. So whether it's software as a service, infrastructure as a service, all that is beginning to happen. Again, it's not important from a management consulting point. What is important from a management consultant's lens is the three things you see at the bottom. What is digital doing to our clients, to our organizations? First and foremost, which it should be, it's enhancing productivity, because with automation, robotics, IoT, I mean, everything is flowing much faster. That's important. What's also very important, I'll talk a little bit about this, it is improving experience. I mean, a YONO customer of State Bank of India has a significantly superior experience than somebody who has to go across to the branch and wait for the cashier, etc., etc. So everything is automated and everything potentially should be an improved experience, unless, of course, you screw up the technology, which also happens. And also, very important, finding new business models. I mean, this is an old cliche, I'm sure you've heard many times. But if you look at what's common between Facebook and Google and Alibaba and Amazon and Ola and Airbnb, the most common thing is there is no return on capital employed as a concept, because they don't employ capital. I mean, the capital is more in terms of marketing and platforms and no asset ownership. I mean, can you imagine, like I was talking to an American friend and he was telling me that, look, 6 years back, if somebody had told me that I would not own my own car and I would actually go and stay in a place which is owned by somebody else and not in a hotel, I would have thought he's smoking something. But the reality is today we are so comfortable with Ola, Uber, we become getting comfortable with Oyo rooms and Airbnb. So the concept of somebody owning an asset is no longer there. It's a question of pay-per-use and the shared service. So this is the bottom screen is important. I think the bottom slide is what is happening in digital. So what does that mean to each one of us? I mean, each one of us who are consulting, how do we look at the world of the future through the post-COVID digital lens? Effectively, if you look at all the companies we work with, I mean, if you're an insurance, it's moving away from the long-term life policy that we used to take to what they call UBI, user-based insurance. If a woman is going out on a date in the evening and she's not sure whether she'll home by midnight or not, she can actually take a 6-hour insurance policy, which protects her from a lot of liability. And that it is valid for 6 hours. As soon as she comes back home, the policy is over. So UBI, as they call it, user-based insurance, is today 15% of the global insurance market. They're expecting that more and more people will insure just in time and not just in case. Similarly, e-commerce, I mean, today 40% of commerce is enabled by cognitive shoppers, which actually like an Amazon, which is prompting you what to buy, etc., etc. Retail, I think, I mean, this we already know. I mean, today, if you anywhere in the US, I mean, you just place your order on this thing, and you can, of course, they go to, let's say, a Costco or wherever and pick up the stuff. Somebody will come and put it in the open car boot. But they're saying soon that will be replaced by robots, which will just come out and place it. So everything will be the information going to the robot doing the automatic picking on the warehouse, and then bring it out. There's no need for a single human being on that place. Manufacturing. I was discussing with the global CEO of ABB last year, and he was speaking at the NASSCOM conference, and he was talking about they have a factory just outside Beijing in China, a complete robotic production facility. They produce robots for manufacturing, and all the factory workers are robots. So imagine more robots making more robots. And he said, we have just 2 employees, and both are in the control room in case something goes wrong. So it's what they call a complete lights out factory. So I think that's what's happening. Finance, of course, I mean, distributed ledgers, smart contracting, blockchains. I mean, today, almost 20% of trade finance is being done through blockchain, so which is a big deal thing. Healthcare, one of the biggest users. I mean, there's no reason why somebody on the field can't just print forceps or print. I mean, 3D printing can actually make all your equipment come down from the internet, so long as you have the right materials. So these are just stories, but I'm saying in every sector, from oil and gas up to mobile commerce, you will find the industry is transforming beyond recognition. And a lot of digital attackers who are asset light might succeed over and above what you would expect the incumbent guys to do. This is something we all need to be careful of and very much aware of. I talked about emerging digital business models. I mean, this is very simple to understand. From the cost model, because of people, when Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook says we will never charge the customer anything, he means it. Because the amount of money they make through monetizing eyeballs or ensuring that their customers are all paying advertisers is phenomenal. It's moved to the Netflix, Disney kind of model where everything is on instant gratification. Today, when Netflix says that, look, I mean, people like you are now watching this. I mean, as you know, whether it's on Amazon Prime or Netflix, I'm sure most of us are watching. I've been watching a movie for the last 3 weeks. I watch 20 minutes. Whenever I have time, I go back and watch another 10 minutes. I mean, it's just crazy that, you can watch like this in little compartments. And learning is also like that. I mean, everything is happening as micro learning. So everything is changing to suit the very limited time frame we have. I mean, so the concept of going and sitting in a movie hall and watching a movie for 3 hours is probably going to go away eventually. Platform model, I mean, which is what GE does with their very extensive manufacturing automation platform, or Siemens does, or Caterpillar for that matter, Uber, as I mentioned. So platforms are nothing but connecting consumers of data or services or products by themselves. So they manage their own. I mean, today when you talk about an Uber, there is a driver, but everything else is managed by the digital platform. So I think that's the data orchestration, giving you the analytics, personalizing to your tastes. So this is the migration we are seeing in digital, from a cost focus to an experience focus to eventually a shared community of users, which will be the platform model. This is the book we're writing. Actually, it's going to be published by Bloomsbury early next year. It's called Accelerating Digital Success. And our thematic really is that digital success will happen when you're able to reimagine your organization. And the hypothesis we are making is that, look, technology is almost irrelevant. I mean, you won't be able to see the bullets at the right, but I mean, effectively, we just take one chapter on technology and then say, okay, now you have these 47 digital technologies. What are the various elements that will make you use that technology? So if I had time, I would quiz you on what do you think are the elements, but let me answer the question for you. So these are the 5 important things in digital. You won't see technology anywhere, but technology is given. I mean, who's bothered about technology? It's available. It's a commodity. But I spent a year as a digital strategy advisor to in the US with insurance companies, and we found that there are almost like 47 to 50 ways by which a potential consumer can actually go in and consider and buy an insurance policy. So the stakeholder journey, the way customers, employees, supply chain partners, demand partners are interacting with the brand. There's a colleague of mine from business school, Dr. Kanak Madrecha, on this call. I mean, he runs one of the most successful consulting companies in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And his entire work is on supply chains and digital supply chains. So, I mean, there is a huge, complete change of journeys that is happening there. Digitizing operations, I mean, the first book I ever wrote was on business process reengineering. And if you remember business process reengineering, the idea was that, look, technology will keep changing. And as we used to do in our consulting exercises those days, our main work was saying that, look, technology is 5th generation. I mean, because we all want the latest and the greatest. But processes are very 3rd generation. So when you try and integrate a 5th generation technology into a 3rd generation process, it becomes very clunky. So you have to maybe re-engineer the process to capitalize on that. So especially when your customer is moving in different directions, digitizing operations means new processes. New processes means multiple plethora of data sources and data flows. So you'll have to then character, and I'll come back to this with one slide on data and analytics. Once you do this data and analytics and process, you're saying, oh my God, my organization's imagination is limited. So I can't do everything in-house. Like I was doing, one of my clients was Bajaj Finserv for a year. And Bajaj Finserv in Pune, for instance, I mean, I remember getting onto a plane with Sanjeev Bajaj and Nanu Pamnani and the entire CEO team. And we went, we actually shopped around for small companies in Tel Aviv, London, Boston, New York, San Francisco, Bangalore, just meeting digital startups and saying, how can you be part of our ecosystem? So the innovation ecosystem theme is becoming very, very important for organization. And finally, I mentioned 3rd generation processes and 5th generation technologies. What about people? Most of us, whether we like it or not, 1st generation people, which means that we became digital immigrants, understanding digital, but not like your son or granddaughter who are born in digital, in the sense that, for them, not having digital technology is not even in question, which is the difference between the digital native and the digital immigrant. And remember, in organizations, your CEO client is actually catering to probably 4 generations. I mean, the elderly people who are in the CXO positions, what they call the baby boomers in America, the people in their mid to late 40s and 50s, who are at the next level of senior management. Then the Gen X people, then the Gen Y, and then the Gen Zs, who are the 20-year-olds who are completely on a different planet. So this is what organizations have to contend with to be successful with digital. So I'll take you through a very few slides and then I'll conclude. Customer journeys. Okay. What does this busy slide mean? It really means in the good old days, I mean, you went to a store, you shopped around, and maybe you liked something, and maybe you went to one more store, and then you bought something. Today, there's plethora of options in terms of what you see on Amazon, what you see somewhere else, and then you do price discovery, and then you can visit 40 brands. If a very fastidious young woman wants to actually experiment with a dress, she doesn't need to go to the store. She can use virtual reality and it will show her 40 different dresses on her, fitted to her body, and see how she'll look. So, I mean, that's really what awareness is all about. So from awareness to consideration to actually making the purchasing decision, to getting after sales service, if it's a car or a motorcycle, to becoming a loyal customer, all this, this is what I meant by multiple journeys. So the journey that you see there in the dotted line, people can be floating from one thing to another. You can do it physically, you can do it on your computer, you can do it on your mobile phone, you can do it by interaction on WhatsApp. So there's almost no limits to the opportunity. And imagine the poor company which is trying to sell to you, how many of these journeys they have to consider before they can sell. So that's the interesting part, and that's the opportunity also for consulting and for the practitioners. So this is the customer journey piece. If you look at this one, I mean, I'm just trying to put all technologies in one box. And most of these you have not heard of, okay? Quantum computing and 5G, okay, Mukesh Ambani even last week talked about the whole of India will be 5G by July of next year. Now, you can't even imagine the speed that you will get if we all adopt 5G and if quantum computing comes in, because then there'll be no limitation on processing speeds. I mean, even today, it's fairly good in cities, but it'll be unlimited. So this will be far ahead of our ability to comprehend. Then we will have to move towards what I mentioned, cognitive RPA, where robotic processes are being made more intelligent through artificial intelligence. Augmented collaboration, where even collaboration like we're doing on Zoom. I mean, a time will come when we don't need to be 30 people around on our own computers on Zoom. You could actually collaborate using this. And but I was talking to the founder of Zoom and Eric Yon, and Eric was saying that, look, we're going to build smell. I mean, if let's say a friend of yours, you're having a conversation on Zoom, you can actually, or for instance, we have a great conversation and you want to get up and shake his hand like a high five, we'll simulate that experience. So that's the augmented collaboration piece. And social listening, as you probably know, many Indian brands do it, which means that anytime you post anything negative on the internet, social listening means that you're listening to the social voice and taking immediate action. I mean, we used to do this for Cisco almost 8 years back in Zensa, where we actually set up a social listening group. And if there was, let's say, any negative sentiment coming on the internet from Ukraine, you could actually populate positive strokes into Ukraine so that that was kind of vitiated. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard of Glassdoor and Mouth Shut, and all these are social listening tools for employee feedbacks. All this is beginning to happen. So I'm saying this is the technology's the dashboard. But what is interesting is, and I'll just kind of tell you the real story of digital. I mean, many of you would have seen or heard of this movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was made in the 60s. They created this, I mean, they kind of conceptualized this computer called the HAL 9000. If you see that movie. 10 years back, IBM created something which is almost eerily like HAL, and that is the IBM Watson, which was the first big artificial intelligence contribution to the world. And amazing stuff. It didn't take off because it was just too complicated. Okay. And now, of course, they've broken it down into software elements called application programming interfaces, APIs. And the APIs are what is IBM Watson. So it's not one big computer. But I'm saying the concepts of what people imagined 50 years ago are now being implemented in reality. This is the analytics piece I told you about. Why don't we hear enough about analytics? Because even today, 80% of people who talk big data and analytics are still on the left-hand side of this chart, which means they still have nice dashboard. They see what went wrong last month, but it's still what we call descriptive analytics. But thanks to artificial intelligence and machine learning, people are now moving towards much more of exploratory analytics. which is what the Amazon and the Google do. When Amazon tells you that people like you bought this book, they're doing predictive analytics. They're also giving prescriptive analytics, saying, why don't you buy this? I mean, people like you will enjoy watching this movie. That's the prescriptive place. So people, obviously you're getting very used to it in entertainment and shopping. But when you start using prescriptive and predictive analytics in day-to-day work, that is when analytics really becomes dangerous for organizations. And a lot of consumer brands are doing it today. The clunkier manufacturing clients of yours will start using predictive analytics as we go along. So I think this is something that we are seeing as a very interesting phenomenon. Another fictional movie character, I mean, this entity called Eva, which was created by a movie called Ex Machina. Today, there is an actual robot called Sophia, whom some of you may have seen. I mean, Sophia actually visits India at least twice a year for some conference or the other. And she's a extremely AI enabled. She looks like what you see on the screen. Sophia was actually, but Sophia spoke in a conference in Saudi Arabia, and you'll be surprised the Crown Prince actually made her a citizen of Saudi Arabia. They were so impressed with Sophia. Sophia is a robot that almost has all the abilities of a human being. So in the future, I have a client in China for the last 4 years in Shenzhen. It's an electronics chip manufacturing assembly plant. I remember in 2016, these guys were employing 2,000 women, typical Chinese assembly line. Today, if you go there, they employ 300 women and 1,200 robots like Sophia. So, and each real person is managing 4 robots, and the productivity has gone up 2 times. So I'm saying this whole cyber physical, or what Chandra calls the phygital world or digital world, is really going to change the way it is. So I think that's really what we're seeing here. What does it mean for people? And I'll just conclude with this, that we talked about technology, we talked about process, we talked about analytics and customers. But for people, what it means is that every employee in every organization is looking for an enjoyable work experience. Working from home is hardly a prescription for enjoyable work experience. But people saying that, look, okay, now let me learn on my own, but don't tell me to go to a classroom or attend a boring lecture for 4 hours. I mean, AI is enabling, for instance, we've invested in a company called Skills Alpha, and this is a complete digital platform. So just to give you, I mean, if you imagine, let's say this woman, let's give her a name, call her Aditi. So if Aditi is a employee of an organization and she spent 2 years and wants to embark on a learning journey, what does Aditi do? The minute Aditi gets onto Skills Alpha, she gets this AI bot who knows all her background. He knows her last 2 years appraisal, etc. And say, Aditi, what do you want to become? So Aditi can actually converse with the bot and say, okay, what could I become? Say, okay, you've got 2 years experience in sales. You could become a sales manager, or you could switch to become a services manager. And Aditi says, let me explore both. And it'll tell her that, look, based on your experience and your assessment, this is where you are. I mean, this is what you need to learn, this is what you need to unlearn. And she says, okay, let me choose the service part. And sure, okay, you need to acquire these following 14 skills. You could acquire it through YouTube, you could acquire it through Facebook, you could acquire it through your own company's training program, whatever. So she's moving from understanding who else has done it before. There's a teamwork and collaboration piece. Building an internal social network enabled by the AI. Moving to choosing what skills she wants to learn through these, what we call contextual curated learning resources. And doing, I mean, she could find a mentor. I mean, AI will help her to find a mentor within the organization, outside the organization. And the mentoring can happen at a time. I mean, this is the classic concept of knowledge management, which is my second area of work, which is where I did my PhD. So the minute you have learning people across the organization, they're contributing to the body of knowledge that becomes the enterprise knowledge workflow. So all this, and that's the beauty of digital, is now enabled through digital technology. So whether it's a Skills Alpha or a Plural site or 10 other platforms available, or for that matter, what we launched from NASSCOM, okay, which is a full-fledged site which is working with the government of India, where anybody can learn AI, etc., etc. So I think this is what we are seeing in the work experience. So what does all this mean? What it means for India, and I'll end with this, is that you could see a massive distribution of jobs over the next 10 years. It is no longer necessary for a successful career to work in a Delhi or a Mumbai or a Pune or wherever. You could work from literally any part of India, which is national optic fiber network enabled, part of digital India, which could ideally be at least 100,000 villages, and every city and town, every smart city in this. So you're talking about like maybe 10,000 locations from the top 7 cities. And imagine that how much it kind of extends the distribution of jobs. So from the present, which is, where you have some colleges, let's say Pune, 5 universities, lots of manufacturing and IT jobs. Imagine if that gets distributed. You will see the kind of situation that you will find on the top. The top bottom left-hand graph is the red dot. Employment not too high because it's all concentrated. Growth of the country is bad. It's only happening in the main cities. Inequality is very high. Social unrest you're already seeing with the farmers' agitation and everything else. But if you do this, you will find that in future you will have distributed employment. That's what you see, the 3 stars on the top right. The growth will be distributed, inequality will be less, and social unrest will be low. This is the kind of America that they built in the last 20 years, and which is, of course, that also has its own problems, but we won't go there. So I'm saying this is what India could be all about. And just to close, if you really look at India 2030, if you get everything right, if all of us as consulting folks are able to articulate these, you'll find that not only at a country level, but at a company level, we'll address all these points. What you see are number one, growth and connectivity through digital that we talked about. AI powered, what I just talked about, lifelong learning systems, cyber physical interfaces, which I talked about, isolation issues of people working in isolation being addressed by technology enabling collaboration, strong government industry partnerships, very important to create jobs and small enterprises. Digital India reality, as I said, out of the 250,000 gram panchayats, hopefully at least 100,000 become completely connected through the National Optic Fiber Network, and skills development, livelihoods for all becoming a priority. So let me stop by saying, what is the imperatives for all of us in this group? Okay. I think when we work with organizations, we need to have that vision of the digital future for the country, for the societies, for the company in with us. Assess where they are. We need to understand what the industry is doing and where the organization can be. What are the opportunities for breakthrough innovation? Very important. And incremental changes like in HR and everything else. How do we work with the CEOs and the chairman and the board of directors to really change the thinking of leaders? Whether the thinking is on customer journeys, on use of technology, on process reengineering, data and people. And most important, because if we get it, then across all these 5 parameters and technology, we'll be able to develop the roadmap for re-engineering through digital and help them to get there. And of course, taking into account cybersecurity, all the risks that will be important through the transformation journey. So what I've tried to do, and I'll stop here, is to kind of give you a glimpse of what is possible. And I'll end with my favorite philosopher's quote, which is Joel Barker. Joel says, everybody sees vision, but vision without action is just a dream. Sometimes, like we see in India often, you get frenetic action on some action or the other, but we haven't seen that vision. So, then it's action without vision. It's what colloquially we say time pass, okay? But vision with action, which is what I think is the opportunity with a digital world, can change the world. So I think this is really what I came to tell you. Please feel free to ask questions, and thank you for being a very patient audience. Let me stop.
Well, this is wonderful, Ganesh. Thank you very much. I think sets the context very, very, very good here. So I think while I also had one question, but I can see Shrikant posting already. And Shrikant is doing some work with, after, let's say, working for a long duration, if I understand, with the bigger organizations now, he's also engaging with the MSMEs closely, which is the new avatar. So Shrikant, if you want to unmute and ask the question, you can, else I can just read it out.
You can just read it out.
Okay, so it says this is very highly advanced technology, so probably the ones that you were referring to, Ganesh. But for Indian MSME, how we should implement the lower level digital technology and make them more competitive globally. So obviously the incremental steps that you mentioned.
No, I think it's a very important point you're making. In fact, we have a group within 5F World, which is our consulting organization, which just works with MSMEs. Okay, because absolutely right, Shrikant. Because you find that, look, when you say industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing and all the big words, they get phased. Okay, so I think simple stuff like sensors on the shop floor, simple stuff of IoT. A lot of people embed IoT all over the place, but then you get the data points, you don't really analyze it. So I think it's a very simple journey of saying how can you collect data early on in the cycle. You're all most of you are living in Pune. If you go to Khadki and go to Kirloskar Oil Engines Limited, do you know that Mr. Kirloskar and Nihal Kulkarni, who is the current MD, they've been building a company where every oil engine that gets produced by them goes out embedded with sensors and chips. So when they install it, even in, let's say, in Jharkhand, it's feeding back information into their control center. So everything we hear about in science fiction has been tricky for the last 3 years. I'm saying a lot of small companies, especially, I mean, I've seen them in Baroda and Ahmedabad, are using it. So they don't need to do the entire gamut. They don't need to get into artificial intelligence, all this wonderful stuff, but they can still have the basic connect between a process that is manufacturing plus operations, plus limited technology, managing their data better, and ensuring that their customers are better happy. So I think, there are some simple methods you can adopt for MSMEs. And it's also happening, by the way, in the Kirana stores. I mean, today, even many of the small retailers in India, and I'm sure once Jio is done with it, every retailer will have it. I mean, anything you can do on the internet. There's no particular reason to go to the Kirana store, but I'm saying it'll slowly get there. And I think that's the beauty of what we are seeing happening.
I had just one question. See, we have Kirloskar Oil Engines is a fairly big company. It has been there for quite some time. What I am talking about are the much lower level small companies, where say with 100 people. Those companies have to make them advanced in manufacturing and technology so that they become more competitive. Because ultimately, when we say Atmanirbhar Bharat, see, we have to produce goods not only for ourselves, but for the global market. And today, our main problem is that our MSMEs are not competitive. I mean, majority of them. Some of them are, but how to make them count in the global market?
No, that's a very good question you're asking. Let me give you actual examples. Like we invested in a company called Studio Copper right here in Pune. We did years back. And what was Studio Copper? It was a nice, I mean, it was a for-profit company, and they were profitable also. But if you go behind Shaniwarwada, you see this place called Tambatali, which is the copper.
Yes.
You know that place. So there are close to maybe 70, 80 copper artisans there. And they were producing, their standard thing. And when we took over that company, we said, why don't we, exactly what you said, why don't we make them to produce, even if it's in small quantity, products which can be sold internationally? We'd like to see it on New York, Fifth Avenue and say that here is a Tambatali product which is now being sold there. And we've done that, okay? In fact, we went out, and the only big investment we made was we went and hired a wonderful woman called Rashmi. Rashmi is from NID, from the in IIT Bombay School of Design. And she creates these absolutely fabulous design, extremely well engineered, so that even they can produce it. In some of those places, if you go there, you see low-cost automation. But today they are selling stuff which is available on the internet. If you go to a site called COPPRE, you will find some of the best copper products being produced by these guys. So this is how the problem we have, and I'm glad you asked this question. Why is Bangladesh doing so much better in textiles than India? Because we haven't got together and got some simple technology to work for them. If you go to Dhaka, find that look, and I mean, it's a shame because I keep buying cheap clothes when I go to New York. And last time I remember I was in a hurry, I went and bought 4 shirts. And later on I checked, 3 were made in Bangladesh, 1 in Vietnam. And I'm saying, why is it not being made in India? Okay, because India has such a significant textile opportunity. But exactly your point, Shrikant. So I think what we need to do is limited technology, what I was saying, limited technology for manufacturing, for production, so that the quality is world-class, but in a small lot size. But there is, I mean, like for instance, Seva, which is probably one of the most well-known NGOs in India. We spend a lot of time in rural Gujarat with them. Same problem, they have multiple women. It's an amazing organization set up by Ilaben Patel. But when you look at what they sell, the quality is so variable that if they do a fair in London, you're afraid of, will people like it or not? So minimum quality standards, I think that's what you probably have to do. But it's not easy. I mean, I promise you, MSMEs think they can do it, but they don't focus on that. And I think that's something that we all need to think about as we go along.
Yeah. I mean, the focus of my question was everyone is saying that because of COVID, the industries are coming out of China. Okay, how true it is, I don't know. And to what extent, I don't know. But whether they will come to India or go to Indonesia or to Philippines or Vietnam or Bangladesh, we don't know.
And
so
Thailand.
We have to,
and Thailand.
And Thailand, yes.
I mean, just because Yogi Adityanath says UP is open, somebody has to also walk into that open.
Exactly.
And Thank you, Shrikant. This, I think, opened up very well from that sense. I think from here too, I can see a question from Vijay, who also has spent a considerable amount of time in India and US covering the oils and oil and gas industry has been one of his closer interest area. His question, which I think is more around the risk management. So, for example, you were talking about Kirloskar having those sensors where they can collect data, which is what is the pragmatic way out today. However, on the other side, we see US banning few Chinese companies. I mean, because you could almost sense the spying, which also happens at the same time. Uh, and on top of that, today the world of hacking is also so it will go in proportion. Of course, when we talk about the digital world, the security will always be working very, very closely in terms of loophole. This is how things have progressed so far. What do you think around it, or
No,
maybe
you
some
have to be
other?
you have to be very, very careful, because I mean, let's face it here. I mean, one of the reasons why even in in Europe, a lot of companies are banning Huawei, of course, one of the most dominant Chinese companies, or even, as you know, even their CFO got arrested in Canada, because people are worried that, look, I mean, if you buy routers and and communication devices from Huawei, they might embed snooping technology in that. So in for instance, we are actually developing a full-fledged uh, policy paper for the government, and it's being written by 5 of us in Pune International Center. And one of the recommendations we will make is that in 5G technology, keep China out. Okay. And actually, see, I'm a great believer in this anti-China rhetoric. Okay, because some things you will, for instance, suppose you ban all Chinese imports, your pharma industry, which is the pride and joy of India, will shut down. You know why? The APIs that go into pharma comes from China. So you can only move, as Dr. Marshall rightly says, you have to move from less China to China less. But to suddenly put on a political rhetoric and say no from China, you will shoot yourself in the foot. What I'm making is certain areas like 5G, advanced, yes, keep China out. But just eliminate China, the cost of this economy, because it's too early. So we have to be smart about it. And I think the question that you are absolutely right, that look, be choosy in what we do well, where we can compete. I mean, the IT services industry, I mean, I've been part of this since the 80s. And my former CFO, Zensar Bala, who's also on this call, we all been talking about how do we go from wage arbitrage, which is how this industry started, to process excellence, to truly digital transformers. So Bala and I have actually worked together with our team for 5 years, as I said, making that digital success story happen. And that's because we were convinced that no better than India to do digital. But once you have that conviction, you'll make it happen. But if you keep thinking that, look, I have to do this to be defensive, at some point it kind of comes and bites you. So I think that's really the way to think about being very strong leadership focused rather than fast follower and or this awful word called jugaad that we use. I mean, almost as though it is a great thing to do in India. Jugaad is a shame for India. Okay, people who write books on jugaad, I know what they're thinking about. This is not what we want India to be. We want India to lead in innovation, not through workarounds, which is what jugaad is. I think these are things that we need to think about as responsible citizens of this country.
Thanks for that. I can see Nagaraju from Hyderabad chapter complimenting you for the session. Obviously, I mean, in the same lines that which is where you ended last, I have a question on this. See, the reality still is in India is it's very, very vibrant, and there are a lot of startups or even companies which are big. They are doing very, very well. But when it comes to innovation, exactly the point that you also mentioned. I was in an investor conference which was hosted by Germany uh, just about a month ago. They were all talking about 5G technology and the businesses, the viabilities around the 5G business model. Uh, and there was shortlisting, basically from, if I understand, from about 120, it was down to 7, which were making the final presentation for the same. And in those 7 companies that we looked at, there was none with any Indian involvement, barring one which was from a person of Indian origin, partnered by someone in US. But by and large, the Indian representation is not there. Now, the contradiction is from a knowledge worker point of view, from a IT services point of view, India is always there right up at the top. However, when we talk about real technology companies, even the likes of TikToks, for example, is something which created a huge wave, but again, it's not something which is coming out of India. So on that, since you're also involved currently with the policy making, etc., what are your thoughts around this? When do we see some big companies coming out?
Oh, a good question, and thanks, Chandan, for asking that question. Right now, as I mentioned, the three areas for my wife and I are working with the government of India, and one of the discussions we are having is exactly what you said. I mean, this whole software products, and of course, TikTok is not really a product; it's a wonderful capturing a market that always existed, because every village child in this country wants to be Shah Rukh Khan, and TikTok just gave them the opportunity to believe they're Shah Rukh Khan. I mean, such a simple answer to aspiration. Okay, and I mean, it's amazing what they did and what they even did in the US, etc. And today, of course, there'll be a lot of effort in this TikTok, and hopefully somebody will succeed. The point I'm making is what we're doing is today. That's, I mean, if you look at our industry, the IT industry, it's about 190 billion, out of which less than 10 billion comes from software. The potential is to scale that to 100. I'm actually working on a committee along with NASSCOM, along with the government of India, saying how do we create software products out of India? I mean, we are using Zoom today. If I go into a Ministry of IT meeting, Zoom is not allowed. Okay, so we use AirMeet, we use multiple technologies. Initially, it takes some getting used to, but AirMeet. I mean, so there's no reason why we can't develop Indian products. It's just that people found it so easy to do services because of the wage arbitrage that we stuck with services. But I think in the future, in fact, I'm now writing a paper which says that, look, like the Prime Minister wants us to think about how can we become a $1 trillion economy really fast. IT industry, services industry will go from 190 to, let's say, 300 billion in the next 3 years. You still have a gap of 700 billion. The Airbnbs and the Olas, etc., will add another 400 billion because they will do IT-enabled services. There's still a 200 billion gap that you get, and that has to be filled by core ICT, as we call it. What is core ICT? It's all that, you know, core stuff that China does so well. I mean, China is a superpower in electronics manufacturing. And forget about the mobile phones and consumer electronics, but even hardware. Today, IBM's, as you know, everything was being done by Lenovo. So I think, you know, China has really taken that market, but we have a chance. Today, the government has come up with this PLIs, as you know, the productivity linked incentive schemes. And hopefully they will get a lot of both Indian players and major players to come in. So I think we will get, I mean, to use an old cliche, a second chance to make a first impression. And believe me, that second chance to make the first impression can be a $200 billion industry. But we've got to make it happen. I mean, we need a strong focus of private sector partnering with government and enabling policies. I mean, why did the IT services industry succeed? Because there was one great visionary man who was then the Secretary of Department of Electronics, Ministry of IT, N. Vittal. And N. Vittal created the Software of India scheme, transformed the industry. I'm hopeful that the PLI scheme that Niti Aayog and the government has done can transform the 11 industries that they transform. But today, you know, there is so much of a level of distrust and, oh, will this happen? And, I mean, if India can become the world champions in cynicism, we all believe, we all have 10 reasons why something cannot be done. But I'm saying if a few positive people can say, not only can it be done, but we will make it happen, like Mr. Kohli so brilliantly did from when he yes, or which Mr. Narayan Murthy then followed in terms of the global offshore model. So you need a few visionaries in every industry. A lot of you in this room will be the visionaries who drive Indian entrepreneurs to success. So I'm sorry for the long speech, but as you know, I'm a very passionate patriot of India. I really believe we can do it, but we have to stop being cynical.
Well, that's a rub off to everyone. We surely will. Nagaraju, I see it's an excellent question that you have. So Ganesh, will we have 5-7 more minutes?
Yeah. Please, no problem. My next meeting is at 7:15, so
okay, sure.
We have another 8-9 minutes without.
Right. So Nagaraju, if you want to speak in person, it's okay. I can read it out as well.
Yeah, I can speak.
Yeah, sure, please.
Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening good evening to the complete quorum in this Zoom meeting, and I thank Chandan specially for conducting such lovely meetings, and which are really, I'm really thankful to Chandan for his initiative, and also to the great man who is speaking now, Mr. Ganesh Natarajan. So my worry is, I come from a background of telecom and digital with process excellence and AI and concern is, though I'm doing all these solutions, my only concern is what will happen to the education system maybe after 5 years or the 7 years down the line, because things are changing at a pace which
Nagaraju, I think there's some challenge with your mic. I mean, with your connectivity,
is
but that's okay. I think
He
we've
was
understood
asking.
your question.
in
No, but
5
he was
years,
asking.
and
Chandan, he was
because
asking about the education system. So maybe if you can
That's
just read
correct,
what
and
he typed.
that's correct. And also to top it up, it's all he also posted it in the chat.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so basically, you spoke about, let's say, India of 2030.
yeah.
Now there's a big um, uh, slogan going on around kids learning coding right away, etc. So I think from that sense, how would the kids, let's say, study? I mean, with the new education policy plus, what are the areas kids should focus on?
Let me answer this by an anecdote. I was speaking at the 100th centenary of Harvard Business School. And I think, as I mentioned, I mean, I have I'm this overeducated Indian with 4 degrees. Okay. I first did my mechanical engineering in BIT Ranchi Mesra, which in fact, one of my classmates, Rajesh Batish, who then joined Tata Steel, is also there on this call. So I think we've all had interesting careers. But then I went on to do industrial engineering in NITI, did my PhD from IIT Bombay, knowledge management after 10 years. After another 10 years, went to Harvard Business School. And when I was speaking at Harvard Business School at the 100th year centennial, I mean, there was Anand Mahindra, there was Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan. And they asked all of us the same question, saying, many of us have been, obviously, Anand Mahindra also educated in India, then went to this thing, and asked us, which is your most happy experience where you learned the most? Obviously, Jamie Dimon and Anand Mahindra said, oh, Harvard Business School has been fantastic, because obviously there's a politically correct answer to give. I said, look, if I have to hold my hand on my heart and say, where did I learn the most? It was in BIT Mesra in Ranchi. People said, why? Surely Ranchi in the 70s, this was the time of the Jayaprakash Narayan movement, etc. So we hardly went to class. Okay. I said, that's where I learned. Okay. I learned what life was all about, and real life gives you that experience. So today, when people tell me and ask me, saying, I have an 8-year-old child, should he be learning Java programming from this, whatever that entity name is? I'm saying, please let that child have a life. Till I was 20 years old, I didn't even bother about, what would I do? I mean, because you learned, you had experiences. So I'm a strong believer. Unfortunately, most children are now in 1-child, 2-child families, and they get completely cosseted by over expectation of grandparents, parents, etc., etc. I mean, I remember talking in a seminar in Beijing where somebody said, what is the fundamental difference between an Indian family and a Chinese family? And this is 20 years back. So I told him, as you probably know, that was the 1-child policy of China. I said, imagine a Chinese family. Okay, there's 1 child, poor guy. He's got 2 parents, parents living in the same house. So there are 4 grandparents, 2 parents, and 1 child. And the child is getting killed by that over attention. And I gave them the example of Lalu Prasad Yadav's family. And by the way, his daughter was my classmate. And I said, look at Lalu's family. 13 children and maybe some 30 cows. And nobody cares what the children are doing. They're having a good time and they're all doing well. I mean, look at the man who almost became chief minister. I mean, there's nothing wrong with him, right? So I'm saying children must be left to have a childhood. So I'm a strong believer. Don't over pressurize your children. You're going to make them break. Let them flower. Let them do what they want. My own daughter, okay, she grew up in Bombay. Till she was in class, 9th grade, I mean, she was okay. I mean, she was among the top 15% of the class. Didn't try to top or anything like that. Suddenly she discovered that she wants to go to a place called United World College. So once that agency kind of hits them, there was no stopping her. After that, she went to the United World College in the US, went and did her MD, PhD in Cambridge University in UK, did her postdoc in Harvard, and then now has her own. She runs the Karuna Ganesh Center for Cancer Research in Sloan Kettering Hospital. No pressure. And all of us, I think, have children and grandchildren who don't need that pressure. They're all bright kids. Give them an environment where they will blossom. So, I mean, sorry for the long answer, but I'm very passionate. Whenever oh my God, I'm doing this, I actually I'm on the board of a company called Robotics, which is actually set up by 2 Anna University graduates. And they set up these robotic centers around. In fact, there are 3 of them in Pune itself. And I remember at the board meeting, I mean, they introduced me to their proudest student, little kid, hardly 3 feet tall. So I asked him, what are you doing? He said, I'm now finishing my fourth session of robotics and artificial intelligence. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 8 years and 6 months. So I said, what are you doing all this for? He says, before I'm 9 years old, I want to be the world's youngest Python programmer. Python, for those of you who don't know, is an artificial intelligence programming language. I said, why? He said, then I'll get into the Guinness Book of World Records. Now, obviously, a parent or somebody has told him. And my other co-director asked him in Tamil, okay, do you watch Vijay movies? Vijay is one of these famous movie stars. So he looks us in the eye and says, I do not watch pictures. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, is this what we want our 8.5-year-old children to do? So I'm just saying, on one hand, we over-pressurize our children. Then we have lousy education in most colleges, apart from maybe a few in this thing. And then we expect our children to do. I'm saying if you have a uniformly good quality of education, which enables the children to grow up and blossom by the way we accidentally did because of less classes, I think we'll all become better.
Oh, great. I think you should speak more to the students which are, I see all the time in the school groups as well. A lot of discussion around it.
I spoke at the Orchid School in Pune.
Wonderful.
I made this exact statement. So Lakshmi, who's my friend, who is the principal of Orchid School, said, please don't talk like this. All the parents will take the children out of the school.
Thank you. I think that was very, very useful. I completely agree with it. So from here, there's one more. We have 4 minutes to close this, to give you 5 extra minutes for the other meeting. From VS, I don't know, sorry, VS, if do you want to unmute and ask your question? You can do it. Please also let us know your name. Or maybe he's saying, can you tell in any particular sector in manufacturing succeeding well in digitalization?
Yeah, hi Chandan. This is Vishal. Vishal here. Vishal Singh.
Oh, Vishal, guy, great.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Mr. Ganesh. Very nice session. Very informative. I have a question which I have already wrote down in chat box. I need to know any particular sector, manufacturing sector, succeeding in digitalization or maybe in industrial IoTs. I can see a lot of FIBC and plastic sectors are facing a lot of challenge in implementing digitalization and IoT successfully.
See, the most successful manufacturing sectors using digital and becoming truly world-class. One is, of course, the pharma sector, which I'm seeing. If you look at Serum Institute, you look at so many others, I think they're really doing well. The second is discrete manufacturing. So if you look at auto component manufacturing, when you look at a Bajaj Auto or a Maruti and all these people, they're doing really good work. So I would think that if you went to a Mahindra plant or a Tata Motors, even here, or you went to the Chakan plant in Pune of GE, you got the world's best technology working there. So I wouldn't worry about it. As somebody very rightly said, and I think it was Srikanth, I think, we need to worry about the MSMEs. The advantage of a Maruti is that they have a drag-along effect. So for instance, even a Subros, which is a tier 1 supplier to Maruti, or the 40 suppliers to Subros, the whole chain is digitized. And they actually expect digitization there. So that's what's happening. But if you say that, look, I'm going to be this wonderfully digitized factory and all my suppliers can go manage by themselves, it doesn't really help. So I think the ecosystem of subcontractors, ancillaries, suppliers, that's what needs to be done. So I think that's missing in the country, and I think probably some of us can catalyze efforts to making that happen.
Right. Thank you. I almost see that there are more questions, but I think we'll have to take a pause here, unfortunately.
But you please feel free, Chandan, to post my email on the chat group.
Sure.
If you want to reach out to me, just feel free. I'd love to interact.
We will. So before Jay, I would request you to maybe just give a final vote of thanks. But just before that, one quick request to everyone: if you can switch on your videos, I'll take a quick click and share it with the chapter. 10 seconds to do it so that I can click it.
That's not bad. Everybody's actually doing it.
All right. So let me.
Hi, Bala. Nice to see you.
So thanks, Chandan, and Ganesh. As always, you know how to mesmerize an audience, and it's one of your strengths, and that is why I guess everyone wants to hear you. And you speak at various fora across the world. So I think, on behalf of IMCI, thank you for making the time for us. And I think many more when the COVID days are over. Now that you have discovered us, we always knew about you. Now, but now that you have discovered IMCI, both at the local level and at a national level, we would. I'm sure IMCI will invite you for an opportunity, for a physical opportunity, because as you spoke about the hybrid model, COVID has introduced us to the electronic model, but I do believe we will return to the phygital model. So, and I'm sure we will get a chance to listen to you. And I bet there are many people here who couldn't ask a question, but they're itching to ask one when they get to meet you physically. Thank you. And I will look forward to having you again amongst us.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Ganesh.
It was my pleasure. And thank you, Chandan. I think you were a wonderful host, and thank you for making this happen. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
I've also put in Ganesh's email, so it's there in the chat.
Yes.
Okay, so
okay, till IMCI Pune organizes the next one. Good evening and have a lovely evening, folks. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.